Welcome to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Join the podcast mogul Phil Better as he interviews successful entrepreneurs that make their living in the digital world. Now, let's join your host, Phil Better, and his special guest today on Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Invest in Yourself, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I am, of course, your host with the most, Phil Better, and today I am excited because we have probably one of the wisest entrepreneurs from on the podcast with Carole Krechman. Carole, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you. Am I okay? Everything? Should I do got it?
You're good. You're good. No worries, Carole. Carole, just out of curiosity, this is your first podcast that you're coming on to?
For you. I've been on a number of podcasts.
Okay, good. I want to just jump into it. I want you to, because you gave me this beautiful bio that I have over here, and there's like a lot of accomplishments. I don't know which one to touch on it. Like you're the first, likely the only 80-year-old woman who has a patent in technology from the U.S. government.
Yes, probably I'm proud to say the oldest woman in America to have received a technology patent, and that was during the beginning of COVID. So it was a blessing and a curse.
Now, how did you come up with, so what is your patent on? So for my audience to understand.
We deliver video without broadband, all Wi-Fi enabled. Every satellite that Elon Musk puts up in the cloud, we can connect to. And so we don't have to, you don't have to have broadband. You can do it on your phone. And the whole idea was that we could teach either people who work for large companies or school children. Anybody can get information on their phone without it being difficult. And we've proven it because my charity, which is at the United Nations called the Peacemaker Corps, is now in its 10th year of what we do every year is have kids make videos, short videos, 1 to 5 minutes, about how to make peace in the world. And since we've launched our platform 3 years ago, we've increased the amount of input from let's say half a dozen or a dozen countries. Now we have 47 countries that participate every year. Of kids under the age of 18, 3 categories. And the subject matter is peace in the streets. How do we make peace in the streets? And that's what the patent was all about. Then COVID hit, and that just put me back almost 3 years because my partners like Honeywell and others that were working on things that would protect people from COVID. So I had to kind of back down where I was. And that's how I decided to start to write the book that I've always wanted to write, which is the story of how my late husband and I built the first major hotel project in Beijing, China in the 80s.
So like, that's a large span of that's insane. Like you're the first woman, a first 80-year-old woman to have a technological patent. You were one of the first people to create a hotel chain in Beijing. Like you have a lot of firsts. So let's go back. What got you into being an entrepreneur?
Well, when I was in school to become an architect, it allowed me, I was in the first class at UCLA, and I was the only woman involved in it. And it just seemed like that there's a creativity in my soul to make things better wherever I am. And that began way back in the years that I graduated from UCLA. And that was in the 60s. And I was the first woman to become an architect, but the architectural school was very new. And it was interesting because I got a lot of respect, which is something that a lot of women don't think that they get. I mean, I just sort of grabbed what I needed to do. And and we moved along in various ways. And my goal was to create a way for more women to get into companies that are primarily male dominated. And we're talking a long, long time ago.
Mhm. So you were on the forefront right at the beginning. Like you were one of the first women architects. You were one of the first graduates from the UCLA Architect School, and then you decided to with your husband. Were you married at the time? Met him at the school?
No, I wasn't, I got married, and I had two children, and then I got divorced. And so I was raising two children by myself, um, and which was another challenge. Eventually, I got married again, and my late husband and I were married for 48 years, and I adopted his children because their mother died. It's I've had an interesting up and down life, but I've always focused on doing something that's going to add benefits to the world.
And so you went over to China. You completed the. It
Well,
took
let me
you
tell
eight.
you about China.
Yeah, I want to hear about China because this is like people hear
Yeah,
about
this is
China, but
now, and um, just very quickly, my dad was one of the first investors in a company called Occidental Petroleum. That was Dr. Armand Hammer,
Mhm.
famous entrepreneur. And it was a serendipity event that he became a member of the first group of investors in Occidental. And that was in the 50s. So I was just a kid in high school. And he got involved through his accountant. It was a funny thing. So now we just fast forward way in 25 by 20 years later when Dr. Hammer had a party at his beautiful offices in West Los Angeles to celebrate the 25th anniversary or the 20th anniversary of Occidental Petroleum. And my focus up till then had been sports and active play. And we had built the first roller skating rink in Los Angeles that was in an area where the folks who lived around there were African American. So it was Black kids who had nothing to do, and we found a basement of a bowling alley in Los Angeles, and I built a roller rink called World on Wheels. And World on Wheels was for people of color, kids of color, and we had metal detectors at the front gate that to come in so that we would have no knowledge that there would be no problems inside. And we were the first commercial venture to actually have those magnetometers at the door. So there've been a lot of firsts in my life, and that building that roller rink was amazing for me to have as a platform. And over the course of the years, I actually bought the Ice Capades with all their ice rinks. I mean, I was in this active sports business for a number of years. How did I get to China? Well, we were invited with my father and mother to this event that Dr. Hammer was putting on to celebrate his 25th anniversary of Occidental Petroleum. And we were in the receiving line, my late husband and I, and Dr. Hammer. I hadn't seen him in years, but my father had, of course, was speaking to him all the time. And we started talking about this ice roller rink and that I had, and that the fact that I had also had a bunch of ice skating rinks, and I was dealing with kids. And it was very interesting because he was very focused. We were in a receiving line, and I guess he spoke to me and my late husband a lot more than he had spoken to anybody else. And then I sat down at the table and I said, to my father, I said, Armin was very excited or interested in our sports entertainment business. He really wanted to know more. And my father said, he was just being polite. So that was so I didn't talk anymore at dinner. And the next, we had a wonderful evening and looked at all of Armin's wonderful artwork and he had collected over the years. And it was a Saturday night. And, I just sort of put it on in the back burner. Monday morning, I get a phone call from Occidental Petroleum. And then the gentleman who Armin wanted me to meet was his first hire from China, a man named Richard Chen. And Richard said to me, and remember the Saturday night, we talked about roller skating rinks, and Monday morning, I'm talking about China. So,
It's a flip of a page there.
It was just like that. So we got in the car and we went over to the office again where we had been Saturday night. And as we parked the car in his garage and we were walking over to the elevators, and a black Cadillac comes very close to us and out pops Dr. Hammer. And he rides in the elevator up with us to not quite to the top floor, but the second floor. And he said, "You're going to meet a gentleman named Richard Chen. I want you to listen to him and I want you to tell him what you're doing. And I think there might be an opportunity for you." Leaving it at that. He got off the elevator and we went up one more flight and met with Richard Chen. That was the adventure of our lifetime. We went to China about 8 months later with a group of folks from LA, including people from the LA Zoo and about 20 people who made music together. They were a church-going group. They were coming to, sing and their hymns to the Chinese, and a couple of political people that I knew from the roller rink that I ran. And we got to the airport, and everybody looked at me and said to my husband and I, "What are you doing here?" Literally, they didn't. "What are you doing?" I mean, these were very important people that were going to China for the first time. And I was told by Dr. Hammer, "Do not tell anybody why you are on this trip." So that was the beginning of our adventure in China. We traveled quite a bit with all these people. The book that I've written will tell you some of the details of it. And we were in the process of building a roller skating ice rink, library for Deng Xiaoping's son, who had been thrown off of a balcony at a school and he was a paraplegic. And so that was sort of that was our project that we got. And it was very similar to what I was doing in the United States, but different. And that began an adventure from 82 to 93. And we ended up building the first mixed-use project, a hotel office apartment complex in downtown Beijing.
Wow. And that's just like from a random meeting talking about roller skates, you're to building the first Western style hotel in Asia.
Right.
In China.
In China, in Beijing. Right in
the heart of it. After you came back, like obviously the book talks about all the amazing things that you've done there. When did you start deciding to make Peace in the Streets?
Well, one of the main things, it was very interesting. There was a big anniversary. It was the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. And I was working with a non-governmental organization that sorry, I'm turning that off. I'm sorry. I don't know. So the 50th anniversary of the United Nations was held in San Francisco. And I was on a board of directors for called the Friends of the United Nations. And I was, they had asked me to join because I was living in China so much of the time. So I joined the Friends of the United Nations. The man who ran it was quite well known in the UN. And it was sort of interesting because I came and went. I was gone most of the time overseas in China, but I did have an opportunity once in a while to join their meetings. And there were some very important people there, including the first, the son of the first Secretary General of the United Nations was in the group. And so I was in San, I was in actually I was in Montreal. No, you know what, when the first when baseball, they had the first World Series in Canada.
Mhm.
I I was invited to that event and met some very interesting people. Well, my life has been so serendipity. The next thing I know is the woman who was running that organization got a divorce, and so she left, and the organization was rudderless, didn't have a leader. So all of a sudden, at that event it was in not Montreal, but in that part of the eastern part of Canada, I got tapped to be the chairman of the Friends of the United Nations. And I kept on telling everybody, well, I don't live here. I live in China, but I'll do the best I can. So for the 50th anniversary, I ran that event in San Francisco, because that San Francisco is where the signing was done for the charter. And that was the beginning of a real relationship that I had with the United Nations. While I was living in China, the Friends of the United Nations became the Peacemaker Corps. And I said, instead of having adults, let's look at how we can deal with the new generation. And that's where that was the beginning of me having leadership in for the United Nations, for the Peacemaker Corps, to make peace around the world. And first we had a couple of events at the UN, and then we decided the best thing we could do is, if kids have phones, you can make a film on a phone. And that tied into my patent. And that's that side of my life. We have been doing this now, we're on our 10th anniversary, but we did about 3 or 4 years before we decided to do the film festival. And HUD in the United States, the Housing Authority, financed these trainings that we did for kids, and we brought them to the shopping malls because we had ice rinks in shopping malls. And so that's how we began to talk about how we can make peace in the streets. So that's my involvement, and I've been involved with the UN for about 25 years now. And that allowed me, when I was in China, to have another level of a way to deal with the Chinese, because I brought not only the kids films, but I also brought the fact that I was also part of the United Nations. So that was a real help for the business to have that relationship with the UN. And it was a very interesting. There's so much stuff when you read the book, you'll see how that it in a very strong way directed me to various good things, including what happened after Tiananmen Square when they went in to kill and the kids got killed. They didn't know the Chinese didn't know what to do. And Ted Turner was there with his TV show because the president of Russia was meeting with the president of China at that very same time. So there was a lot of serendipity stuff going on in China at that time. And we were asked by the head of this man named Ying Roshan, who had played the lead in Death of a Salesman, which was that famous play. He played Willie Loman. He was now the head, because they were trying to figure out how they were going to back up the fact that they had killed all those children in Tiananmen Square. So we were like the guinea pigs of the Western world. So I mean, it goes on and on. That the
Wow.
synergy between Us and the Chinese was amazing. And we had great friends from the top to the bottom, and we still do. I mean, I don't know whether people that are listening to you knew that there was a balloon over Ontario, Canada, that the Chinese had put up there, what, like 3 weeks ago or something?
Something about that. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
around
well,
that
I
time.
think they did it for the launch of my book. Now, I know everybody's going to think I'm crazy, but why did they put that balloon up there? I actually wrote a play called Balloons Over Beijing that it never got published, but I have a, yeah. So, and then about 2 weeks after that, right before we launched our book, the woman who was my first secretary at in Beijing at our office, I know she was a spy, and she's now in Beaumont, which is very close to where I live. And she called me on the phone and, oh, I hear about your book. And I said, Shalu, I'm very, very busy right now. We can't talk. And I hung up the phone on her because I don't want anybody out there to know in China what we were doing because we were launching this book. So what we built was not only a hotel, but an office building and an apartment complex that was attached to the hotel. So if you were a white person and coming to China for the first time and wanting to do business, not only could you have a hotel room, but eventually you could get an apartment. And they were connected by a corridor where they brought the food either to the hotel or to the people that lived in the apartments. And then we have an office block so that it was all kind of synergistic, which the Chinese had never really ever seen. But we brought it to China. So you had a hotel, you had apartments, and you had an office. So you could have your office in the office. One of your high paid people could live in an apartment, a real Western apartment, and the people would come to the hotel. There's a funny story about the Chinese. So when we opened the hotel, we had a penthouse, the top floor, and all was a little bit better than any of the other stuff. The penthouse was the penthouse. There was a whole floor of that. And when I came back to China, we went back and forth quite a bit. I said, well, let me see what the penthouses look like. And they said, oh, well, they're not quite, we're having a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, there's air conditioning is on the roof and it's making noise. So we haven't been able to open those apartments yet. And I said, really? Let me go look. No, we're taking care of it. I said, let me go look. So I went up and I started to look. And, they had a peephole so people could see who's coming to your door. So I looked at the peephole and most of them were covered with some tape, so I couldn't see what was inside. And I walked around the whole top floor, and I finally found a couple of where that peephole had the paper they had put over it had slipped. And I looked in, and lo and behold, what did I find? I found apartments filled with televisions and refrigerators and other things that they were selling out the back and not giving us any of the money. So that's who the Chinese were and are. Sneaky, all for them. I mean, we did figure it out, and we opened up, the next time I came back to China, my husband and I stayed in one of those penthouses, but you had to watch every minute of it and still do. I was in Wuhan at the lab. We traveled all over China. And then when Tiananmen Square was over, this gentleman Ying Roshan, had been hired to try to smooth things over with the world, called us in and said, we'd like you to take a trip to another city and meet with some people in various ways. And then you go back and tell the world how generous we are and how terrific we are. So we said, okay, we'll do that for you. And so we went to Tianjin, which is where most of the shipping goes in and out of. And by the time we got through with 2 days, there was a phalanx of people behind us that followed us everywhere. We went to people's homes where they were raising fish, and they wanted us to see everything good about the Chinese so that we could go back to the Yingluo Qianhu and be able to publish that this was a mistake, that the reason that the people, the police and the army went into the Tiananmen is that they didn't speak the same dialect, and they had all kinds of excuses for them because they didn't know what to do after killing those children. But they survived, and we lived there with the hotel operational until the towers came down in New York, and then we sold the hotel back to China and moved to Bermuda for a few years to start another project before the town, before things changed in America. So we're back home, and I've written a book, and I love the stories that I've heard from people that this is really a new way to learn about what China's all about, and know that we have to watch them every single minute.
I want to talk about, because you were able to start so many different projects and organizations and businesses. If we have someone who's listening here, what kind of tip would you have for them to start going out and starting their own business or their own foundations even?
Just never give up. If you have an idea, you have a focus, you have something that you think will help the world, never give up. Just continue to take one foot after another, and you'll succeed at some level. Doesn't mean you'll succeed at the level that you started off at, or it may even end up sending you to some place that will be wonderful that you never even thought you would be able to see. I think it's in everybody that has that kind of vision. Big visions, small visions, caring about somebody, wanting the world to be a better place. All of that would help us, every single one of us who live on this planet.
I love that. That's such a great piece of advice. We are coming to the end of the episode, and I'm really, really upset. I can't wait to read your book. I've just ordered it because I know it's going to be a phenomenal read, and I am looking forward to having you back on the podcast later on, maybe when you have another book, or we can discuss other things. But we do have the spark question of the show, which is from Seek Discomfort. And I think this is an amazing question for you because you have lived such a robust life. What are you most grateful for in life?
I think that what I'm grateful for is that my world, bad and good, has allowed me to expand and do the things that I get passionate about. Passion, I think that's the word that I was looking for. People
Yes.
have to take that and figure out, what is your passion in life? You don't have to do major things, but what is the passion of your life? And if you can follow that, your life will end up, I believe, expanding to something you never even thought about.
Again, wisdom from Carole. Carole, I'm going to jump off the screen here. I'm going to let my audience know where they can get in contact with you, where they can purchase the book so that they can support you. So the floor, ma'am, is yours.
Well, Amazon is selling the book online. There's several versions. There's just an audio, which is about $9. You can listen. And then there's another $18 version that doesn't have a hard copy and cover, and then there's a $25 version that has me in color and and a beautiful cover. That's and now Barnes and Noble is asked me to start selling books and talking to people from where I live in the Palm Springs area of California, and I will be coming across the country slowly with them. And Walmart's looking at us about selling books. It's an important story, and I'm pleased to say that people find it interesting and read it fully. I gave away quite a bit of books where I live, and when people come back to me and say, I couldn't put it down, I read it to the end. It's a door opener to another world that you might not have even thought about. And I love the idea that people are, saying that this to me, that they are really enjoying what I wrote. But you just have to put one foot in front of the other in life and hope that you're not falling into a big chasm, but that you're living your life in a good and positive way.
Thank you, Carole, for coming on the show and sharing your story. I am so I just ordered while you were talking. I ordered your book because I can't wait to read it. So thank you again for coming on the show. Yeah,
tell me what you think after you read the book.
I will definitely send you an email the minute I'm done the book and letting you know how I found it. I'm looking forward to sharing this episode with my audience because I know it's going to be of value. And speaking of this, please, my audience, check out the links down below. Get the book. I'm probably going to be updating it saying how amazing it was to read. So please go ahead and get the book. The links will be in the show notes down below. And again, Carole, thank you so much for being here. And remember to always invest in yourself.